All right, the big story this evening. In a move that is being seen as a setback to India's chip manufacturing plans, Foxconn has backtracked from its joint venture with Vedanta to make semiconductors in India. Remember, Foxconn, the world's largest contract electronics maker, and Vedanta signed a $19.5 billion pact last year to set up semiconductor and display production plants in Gujarat. Meanwhile, Vedanta has expressed confidence and reiterated its commitment to its semiconductor fab project. What does Foxconn's exit mean for India's chip-making plans? Is it a minor blip or will it have major repercussions? That's the big story on India tonight. But let me first go across to my colleague Sumita, who's joining us with the story so far.
Right, so Taiwan's Foxconn is pulling out of the JV with Vedanta. That deal was set up to produce semiconductors from India. In fact, if you remember, just last week, Vedanta Group had taken full ownership of the joint venture with Foxconn, set up last year to manufacture semiconductors. Now, will it mean a derailment of Vedanta's chip manufacturing plans? Well, Vedanta tells ET Now, and I quote, Vedanta reiterates that it is fully committed to its semiconductor fab project, and we have lined up other partners to set up India's first foundry. We will continue to grow our semiconductor team, and we have the license for production grade technology for 40 nm from a prominent integrated device manufacturer. What Vedanta also hints at is that the company will shortly acquire a license for production grade 20 nm as well. It also says, and I quote, Vedanta has redoubled its efforts to fulfill the Prime Minister's vision for semiconductors, and India remains pivotal in repositioning global semiconductor supply chains. Remember, Foxconn and Vedanta signed a pact last year to invest $19.5 billion to set up semiconductor and display production plants in Gujarat, seeking to tap into the country's plans to become an electronics major, to make mobiles, tablets, EVs, and so much more, which was much in line with government's ambitions of making India a semiconductor hub. But the initial application submitted by Vedanta for the semiconductor unit was also not approved by the government, and hence the company even filed a revised proposal. If you remember, we reported some time back, Foxconn had shared a statement wherein it said Foxconn is working to remove the Foxconn name from what now is a fully owned entity of Vedanta. Foxconn has no connection to the entity, and efforts to keep its original name will cause confusion for future stakeholders. In fact, Foxconn, which is the largest, world's largest contract electronics maker, says that it is confident about the direction of India's semiconductor development and will continue to support government's Make in India ambitions. In fact, the JV Vedanta Foxconn Semiconductors Private Limited was a wholly owned subsidiary of Vedanta Group entity Twin Star Technologies. The new structure, minus Foxconn, will make Vedanta India's first company in integrated semiconductor and display fab business.
All right, thank you for those details. Sumita Karir, my colleague there, laying out what went wrong. But what are the implications of this? Now, on the face of it, it's a disagreement between two partners because things didn't quite work out as they hoped to. But is it a larger commentary on what's happening in the Indian semiconductor space? We asked that even as Union Minister Rajiv Chandrasekhar has tweeted out his comment saying they don't read much into it. Both companies, Vedanta and Foxconn, are now free to pursue their own plans in India, and the semiconductor business and the Make in India vision for semiconductors is very much there. Another bit of context before I go to my guests is why it's important for India to become self-reliant to whatever extent on semiconductors. We import all of it. It's something which is required in pretty much everything that we use, and the pandemic taught us that those supply chain issues can be a big problem. So which is why this entire project between Foxconn and Vedanta was such a big deal, and which is why the question mark and the bit of surprise that they've parted ways. Now, for more perspective, I'm joined by Ajay Dua, former Secretary, Ministry of Commerce and Industry and economist, Ajay Dasgupta, former ambassador and representative of India at the WTO, also with me on the show. Welcome to both of you, and thank you so much for speaking with us today. Mr. Dasgupta, I'm going to come to you first on whether this at all talks about Foxconn's interest and entry into India, apart from the Vedanta bit of it, because it's a major company, one of the largest sort of contract electronics makers in the world, and their entry into India was also the big deal.
Foxconn is already in India. It
Yeah.
is
I
assembling
mean,
iPhones, for instance.
correct. I mean, putting in their own money, starting this foundry with
That's right.
Vedanta, that kind of involvement and engagement.
Yes.
Yes.
In the case of Vedanta, the main problem with the semiconductor fab unit is that the government wanted a technology partner which had access to high level technology for making nodes from 40 nanometers to about 28 nanometers. And the government also wanted this technology partner to invest in the Vedanta Foxconn company. Now, that is something which was not possible to tie up by either of the partners. And this has been going on for quite some time. That Vedanta was revising its application, it was tapping various semiconductor manufacturers with the kind of expertise and IPRs that are required, but it failed to do so. And that is why I think Foxconn has pulled out.
Ajay Dua, how do you see this? Is this, as it's being pitched, a hit to India's semiconductor plans?
Not really, Tamanna, if you would ask me. I think, as Jayant mentioned, this was likely to happen because it had been moving towards it for quite some time. I say this because the PLI scheme for semiconductors had been floated more than 6 months ago. 3 parties had participated, and in that, Vedanta, because of Foxconn partnership, was considered ahead of others. But where the joint venture was kind of stumbling was when the government, the PLI ministry concerned, Ministry of Electronics, asked them to do 2 things. One, to get a technology partner, and they tried to link up with SMT of Netherlands in Europe. It didn't quite work out. Second, the government had also said, you show us your wallet. You want to invest $19.5 billion and into an integrated plant which was starting right from a foundry. That means setting up a clean water plant, then making from silica, setting up a foundry, from foundry moving on to making chips, and then the display fabs. So it was the whole works. Probably one of the largest plants was envisaged at a cost of $19.5 billion. And if I recall, the joint venture always led by Vedanta, because Foxconn was to be a minority partner, had sent out feelers and as well as teams around the world to look for money. I don't think they had any success in technology, it also in this particular aspect of raising money. So what was the result? The government on its own has cancelled the earlier 3 bidders and extended the time limit now with serious partners and money up to December 24, from a deadline which was 6 months ago and where 3 JVs had been received. Now it's been extended by a year and a half. So Foxconn, apart from the fact that it didn't have much of a say in running of the joint venture, saw in it that it was binding itself in a country where it's going to take a long time for the decision to be made, and the partner, the so-called senior partner, is not in a position to raise money and enthuse any other technology partner. Let's remember, Foxconn is not a technology partner per se in semiconductors. That company is called TSMC of Taiwan Semi-Manufacturing Corporation, which is really the technology partner. It had decided to go with another partner in India. So that's why the government wanted a true semiconductor maker.
No, so you know why? Oh, so put some perspective, and you've explained it very well, Mr. Dua, but put some perspective into all the fanfare we saw a few months ago. I remember seeing already estimates of how much employment this was going to generate. And yes, it was taking place ahead of state elections in Gujarat, where the plant was supposed to be. And then Maharashtra came and said, politicians here came and said, what about us? Foxconn was supposed to come here. And then now we get into the nitty-gritties and the real details that everything was not very clear at that point. So put that into perspective. What was all that fanfare about? And was there some kind of misunderstanding or miscommunication of what this deal was supposed to bring to the table?
I think, Tamanna, the government, when it sanctioned, and in this particular industry, the government was giving as much as 50% of the investment by way of an capital grant. In addition, the government of Gujarat had committed to give 20% of the cost of the cost also as a guarantee. So that was going to make it 70% in all. So it was a lot of money being committed, which the government had to be careful, public money. And when they found that the joint venture is not making any progress whatsoever, it rightly said, I think we need more time and you are free to apply. But Vedanta still took the stand, public stand, saying, no, we are not going to apply again. We are going to push our earlier application. So I think Foxconn read that as well, saying that it can't go and become a partner of somebody else as long as it's a partner and a minority partner of Vedanta. It decided to walk out. And in any case, I will reiterate that in semiconductors, chips, whether advanced or otherwise, Foxconn did not have a major comparative advantage. So India is not a loser, Vedanta is not a loser in that sense, but we certainly would have welcomed the investment which would have come with the money which Foxconn would have brought. And Foxconn knows the Indian environment. It came way back in 2006-7 Vedanta into Siriperambur as a contract manufacturer for handsets. And initially, before that, it was a partner of Nokia, if you recall, which then went bust, or decided to withdraw from India. So they know it, and even today, they are involved with the Apple iPhone making. So it would have been useful to have them here, but let's not worry too much. If they are not there, I would have been worried if a real technology partner of semiconductors who's proved itself somewhere in the world were to withdraw.
Okay. So, no skin off our nose, the semiconductor project will go ahead. Can Vedanta move it ahead is also, a big question. Jain Dasgupta, I just wanted to bring perspective on the competitive push for semiconductors right now in the world. Some of the largest countries in the world. Post-pandemic, we're not the only ones who realized you can't depend on China for semiconductors beyond a point. It's a death knell. Biden has announced his huge semiconductor policies. Some of the largest countries in the world are showering subsidies on these semiconductor makers. So whatever happens from here on, whether it's Vedanta with XYZ, there is going to be a competitive bid for these companies that have the technology to come and set up shop in your nation, isn't it?
Yes, in fact, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company and Samsung, they are both keen to invest in India. Whether they will go with Vedanta or not, or they will go on their own, is another issue. The problem, that, as I understand, is that they want more than 50% subsidies, and they are going to negotiate on that. As in Gujarat, for the Micron technology plant of $2.75 billion, Micron is investing only $825 million. 70% of the balance amount is coming from the government. So I think TASMAC and Samsung may have something similar in mind, that if they set up in a particular state where the state is also prepared to subsidize on top of the central government, then they can have some 60-70% subsidy. So I think that is the game, because India is too large a market to pass up the opportunity So the semiconductor fab units will come here. It's only a question of time and negotiations with these major companies which have the technology and expertise.
And absolutely, states are competing with each other. Yes, yes, Mr. Dua.
Tamanna, you'd asked about who are the largest players or which are the countries which are doing well here. Surprisingly, China is the biggest producer and the biggest importer as well. The Chinese manufacture a lot of chips. They use them because their requirement in all kinds of applications ranging from home appliances to defense industries, missiles, etc. is huge. The Chinese are keen to, but now let me put it the other way. Now that the US has started a tech war with China and hit the Chinese by not sending them the equipment which is required to produce the semiconductors, the Chinese have become vulnerable. And they have reacted, as we all know, by declaring that their rare metals and their chemical compounds, namely gallium and gallidium, they would not allow that. They are going to put export controls on that from 1st of August. So it's a tit for tat going on. And I think that is where the world looking for China plus one or China plus more, India was figuring in, and we could be tapping, very rightly, as mentioned, TSMC, Samsung, but the advanced chips, state-of-the-art chips are coming from Japan, South Korea, Netherlands, and even the United States. And the United States, after imposing, Jake Sullivan's principle, it's called. Now, Jake Sullivan is their national security advisor. What has he said? Let's hit the US. Let's let the US hit China where it hurts the most by hitting their founding technologies of industries like AI and the defense industry. And in that, microchips, semiconductors are a critical part. So ban their exports there, not only just exports to China of such items, but the free world, which includes now Netherlands, South Korea, and Japan, which have joined the US in so-called the controls or the sanctions, but also saying anyone sharing intellectual property rights is also liable for sanctions. Intellectual property. Third, they've said in order to hit quantum computing, that Chinese have been with the US in lots of research.
Absolutely. I need to wrap up here, but that's fascinating, Mr. Dua, but I do need to wrap up here, and today's focus, of course, is on India's semiconductor game and whether the Foxconn exit from the Vedanta JV is going to be a hit to us or not. The consensus on this discussion, at least, is it's just a matter of time before we get our own foundry in place, and not too much of an effect as of now. Now, moving on.